Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to CB's Gold MMA show. Today we're going to cover a couple little pieces of news real quick, and then we're going to go straight into predictions for tomorrow night's fight night on Fight Pass, Alvarez versus Dos Anjos, which we all know was the first night of 3 nights of fights leading up to UFC 200, and Rafael Dos Anjos will defend his UFC lightweight championship against Eddie Alvarez. So it should be a good fight. I got some good fights on the card. We'll go over those in just a few minutes. Just want to cover a few pieces of news. So this week there was another fight added to UFC 200. It's going to be Sean Strickland coming back. He just fought at UFC 199, got the split decision win over Tom Breeze a few weeks ago. He's going to return, make a quick turnaround against a guy who hasn't fought in a while, who violated the anti-doping policy and was out for a year. Tim the Dirty Bird Means returns at 170 to face off against Strickland. It's a real good fight. Always like watching Tim Means fight. He's always fun to watch, and Sean Strickland always brings it too. So it should be a lot of fun, a good matchup. I think, depending on ring rust, I think Tim Means can definitely take that fight. So we'll see as we get closer. Like I said, I do predictions week a few days before, whatnot. Next quick piece of news. Linton Vassell is out of Bellator 158, the London card, in a few weeks. He has a bad cut over his eye. I think it was sustained in training. He was facing off against Francis Carmont, who you might remember from the UFC, training partner of George St. Pierre up at TriStar, was a reserve winner in the first Dynamite light heavyweight tournament. So, he's got a new opponent, Carmont. He's going to face Lucas Klinger. I don't know much about Klinger, but I would have to guess that it's an easier fight for Carmont than Vassell, because Vassell's a real tough guy, very well-rounded, great submissions. So, that card in London has been taking a few hits, but we'll see if it delivers in the long run. The last piece of news, which is very interesting, I found out yesterday. Frank Mir has asked for his UFC release. Basically, if you aren't informed yet or didn't know, Frank Mir violated the anti-doping policy. He wants to kind of appeal it or pay for his own second test to prove that it was could have been a tainted supplement, that he didn't really know, or whatever the case may be. He wants to appeal it, but for right now, he's facing a 2-year suspension. He's asked for his release because he cannot fight, as well as not being able to do Fox Sports broadcasting, so he can't be an analyst or a co-host to UFC Tonight or the pre-fight shows or anything doing like that. So he's not really making money right now. He's stated he needs to find a way to pay the bills in the long run and continue to raise his children, since fighting is off the table for the next 2 years. So it's a tough position for Frank. Always liked the guy, great fighter, one of the pioneers of the heavyweight division, former UFC heavyweight champion, long and storied career, win or lose. So it's tough to see a guy in this position. So I wish the best to Frank Mir. Hope everything gets figured out, or maybe the first test wasn't correct and you get to come back early. So we'll have to see what happens. But so let's get into the predictions. Like I said, tomorrow night, July 7th, 2016 on Fight Pass. If you don't have Fight Pass, you need to subscribe. Your $10 a month is definitely worth it. I've had Fight Pass since day one. It's awesome. It's the best, You get all the prelims, all the early prelims for all the events. You get certain exclusive events like this one. The Anderson Silva-Michael Bisping fight a few months ago was an exclusive to Fight Pass. A lot of the internationals, other events, whatnot. So $9.99 a month is definitely worth it. You get to see, looking for a fight. There's so much content on there. You could watch everything, and it would take you probably a few years to clear everything out. So let's get into predictions. I'm going to start at the bottom of the card and work our way towards the title fight. So our first fight is a welterweight matchup between Vicente Luque and Alvaro Herrera. Vicente Luque, you might remember from the Ultimate Fighter, Black Zillions versus ATT. He is a Black Zillion, very talented. His last fight I think was back in December. I think it was on UFC on Fox card. He fought Hayder Hassan, who was a finalist in that season. Hayder lost to Kamaru Usman in the final. And then Vicente Luque submitted him with an anaconda choke, actually put him to sleep. So it was a technical submission. It was a very good fight. I always like anybody from the Black Zillions I'm a fan of. But Vicente Luque is a very tough guy, good with submissions, somewhat of a little bit of a grinder, and just gets stuff done. Before that, his only other UFC fight was he lost to Michael Graves at an Ultimate Fighter finale. He was on the undercard of that ATT Black Zillions fight, and he lost to Michael Graves, who we know is still in the UFC. But he's fighting a guy in Alvaro Herrera. The guy is 9-3. He's had one fight in the UFC. He got a knockout win against Vernon Ramos, actually 30 seconds into a fight on the Magny Gastelum card. Before that, he hadn't fought in the UFC before, had fought in different places, whatnot. Not really a lot of big names under his belt. He's kind of got a grab bag of finishes, few KOs, couple submissions. So it'll be an interesting fight. I think Luque can take this fight for sure. I think Vicente is more well-rounded. I know he has a little bit of a lesser record at 8-5, but I think he can take Herrera. I think he can take him down and submit him, or possibly even rock him a little bit, TKO him, whatnot. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm picking Vicente Luque. That is my official pick for this card. So next fight is a 135 fight between Marco Beltran and Reginaldo Vieira. Marco Beltran has had 2 fights in the UFC already, both won by decision. He fought Chito Vera at the Verdum Hunt card in Mexico, and then at Henderson Masvidal Fight Night, which was back in November around Thanksgiving, so it's been a little bit. He won the split against Guang Yu Ning. So, he's before that, he actually had 3 straight losses, 2 submissions and a TKO. But his wins in the UFC were by decision. That's Marco Beltran again, the Psycho. So I guess I probably should be going for him since we share a nickname. But he's fighting against Reginaldo Vieira, who has fought 1 time in the UFC. He fought Delano Lopez, who's also on this card, back in August for the UFC 190 Rousey versus Betch Correia card. He won the decision. Before that, he's got almost all of his wins are submissions. Very talented jiu-jitsu player. His actually 2 of 3 losses are to guys that are in the UFC now. His first loss was against Pedro Munoz, who's a great submission fighter out of King's MMA, out of Southern California, where I'm at. But that was 7 years ago, so it was a while. It was his first pro fight. And then back in November of 2011, he lost to Rony Jason, who we know from the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. Very talented fighter as well, coming back soon. Actually, just got announced for a fight. You know what? I'm gonna have to go with Reginaldo Vieira. I'm picking him. I think he can get the submission against Marco Beltran. We'll see what happens, but I got Reginaldo Vieira. So if you're keeping count, put me down for Vieira by submission. Our next fight, a lightweight matchup. Another Black Zillion involved, Gilbert Durinho Burns. He's a very good Black Zillion. Had a hiccup recently when he fought Rashid Magomedov back in November. He fought on the Belfort Henderson 3 card out of Sao Paulo. Otherwise, he hasn't lost. He's fought 4 times in the UFC. He's 3-1. He has 2 submissions and a decision win, and his only loss was a decision. Very talented. Actually, I hope he doesn't get hurt too bad, because the next week he's fighting in Metamoris out here that I'm going to. I really want to see him grapple. I'm looking forward to that. But he is fighting a guy named Lucas Sajewski. I think I pronounced that okay. He's 13-1. Another guy with a grab bag of wins. His only loss is his most recent fight, which was his UFC debut against Nick Hein, who's a real tough German fighter. But that was back in June of last year, so that was over a year ago on the Gaethje Penne fight night. So he lost the decision to Nick Hein, and so I think this is a good fight for both guys. This is at 155, but I'm picking Gilbert Durinho. I got Gilbert Burns on this one. I really think he'll pull it off, and wouldn't be shocked with a submission. But either way, I got Gilbert Burns. Put me down. Gilbert Durinho gets the win. And, so we'll move a little bit farther up the card. The interesting about this card also, guys, is because it's a Fight Pass only card, there's Fight Pass prelims, but there's no separation. So there's 8 prelims on Fight Pass. If I didn't say it before, I think it starts at 3:30 p.m. West Coast time. So there's 8 prelims, and then you got the 4-fight main card on Fight Pass. Anyways, we're going to move up the card. We got a nice 135 fight between Felipe Sertanejo Arantes. He's a Brazilian fighter out of Macaco's Gold Team. He trains with Tomas Almeida. He was with Tomas and the rest of the team with Macaco and some of the other guys in Vegas for the Almeida Garbrandt card when Tomas fought Cody. Very talented fighter. Had a little bit, he's had a lot of fights in the UFC. It's kind of been up and down for him. He's fluctuated wins and losses with a draw in there at one point. But he's a good fighter. He's a talented fighter, well-rounded. He's good everywhere. Before that, he had fought all over the place. And he actually has a victory over John Lineker, who we know is main eventing a fight coming up in a few weeks against Michael McDonald, but that was back in 2009, if I remember correctly. But he's fighting Gerard Sanders, who he's had 3 fights in the UFC. He's had a loss by retirement due to TKO. I guess he just couldn't go anymore against Yodeni Cedeno, who I think is the Pink Panther. He had a no contest against Pedro Munoz, who we talked about a little earlier. So that was overturned to a no contest because Munoz actually won and then tested positive for testosterone metabolites. But his last fight, which was in July of last year, so it's a year apart, was at the Ultimate Fighter ATT Black Zillions finale, and he beat Russell Doane by decision. And Russell Doane is actually fighting one fight above this on the card against Pedro Munoz. So there's a lot of mixed talent in between people. There's a lot going on. It's tough to say on this one. I think Sertanejo Felipe Arantes can pull this off. So I'm picking Arantes. Mark me down for him. I think he pulls it off. So we'll move one more up. We got another 135 fight, as I just said, between Russell Doane and Pedro Munoz. This is an interesting fight to me because, Russell Doane's a tough guy. He's been in the UFC for a while, a couple years. He's had 4 fights in the UFC, but it was first 2 wins, then 2 losses. It's tough to pick this guy sometimes. And, he's fighting Pedro Munoz, very talented grappler. He's out of King's MMA and Black House. So, it's an interesting thing. Munoz's first fight in the UFC was against Rafael Sunsao, who's on UFC 200 against TJ Dillashaw. He lost to him. He won the next time by TKO. Then, like I said, that no contest, and I think he was suspended for a year. And then when he came back in November, he lost to Jimmy Rivera by a split decision. So he hasn't fought since November. He's a good grappler. It's tough to pick on this one. I think I'm going to go with Pedro Munoz. He just, in my opinion, he has a better camp. He's got better jiu-jitsu. Russell Doan, I think, is like a blue belt. So I'm going to go with Pedro Munoz. Wouldn't be shocked if it was a submission, but we'll see. I know Munoz working with Rafael Cordero's working on his striking, so it'll be interesting to see. I pick Munoz. Our next fight is actually a guy who's a friend of the MMA Roasted podcast. I've met this guy a few times. Super nice guy. Anthony Berchak is facing off against Delano Lopez. Berchak, unfortunately, has had a tough time in the UFC. His first fight got canceled because Joe Soto replaced Renan Barão to fight Dillashaw for the title. Berchak got put out in the cold, so he didn't get that first fight. Then he finally got a fight against Ian Entwistle. He got submitted a minute in with a heel hook, which Entwistle, that's a specialty, so it makes a little bit of sense. And then he actually did get that fight with Joe Soto, and he knocked Joe Soto out in the first round, about a minute and a half in, I think a little bit more than that. But that was back in June of last year. But his most recent fight was in November, and he got knocked out by Tomas Almeida. I think most of you guys remember it. It was on the Fight Night Belfort Henderson 3 card, and Almeida just literally just folded him up just bad. Berchak needs a win. Tough guy, really tough guy, known for submissions and his striking knockout power. Delano Lopez, on the other hand, he's 18-2. He's fought in the UFC once. He lost to Reginaldo Vieira back at UFC 190 last year. Before that, he had only lost once. I was looking at his record, and there's not really a lot of names on there that I know. He is 18-2. He's got 12 submissions. But I think on the feet, I think Berchak's got it, and I don't see why Berchak. I don't know. I think it'll remain standing. Berchak's got good takedown defense, if I remember correctly, unless you're getting him with a heel hook, which is not really fun. I'm gonna go with Berchak. I'm picking Anthony Berchak on this one. So that's where I'm going with that. Our second to last prelim is a fight that was supposed to take place at 199. It got moved to this card. I don't necessarily remember if there was. I don't think there were issues with either of them of why it got moved. I think it was to help push this card a little bit more. It's John Makdessi, who we know as the Bull. You know him, unfortunately, for probably how he lost to Cowboy recently, and then he had his jaw wired shut because it was broken, really bad, dislocated. He's fighting Mehdi Baghdad, who was, I think he was on the Ultimate Fighter. He was on McGregor's team, and but he lost in I think it was the second round of that one. So he's kind of been laying in wait. So Makdessi and Baghdad. Makdessi, you know, is more of a striker than anything, but he's had a tough time in the UFC. I mean, he's had quite a few fights, more than, I think, like 10 or more fights, but he won his first two, lost his next two. His last two have been losses. He lost the decision at 194 against Yancy Medeiros, and like I said before that, he lost to Cerrone by TKO, had his jaw dislocated and broken, wired shut. But he's a good striker, heavy-handed. And Baghdad, you know, he doesn't have a lot of losses, and when he does, or when he had the losses, the most recent fight was a loss at a fight night. He lost to Chris Wade by submission. So I think on the feet, this is a good matchup. We'll see how Makdessi bounces back. It's been about 7 months since he's fought. So we'll see what happens. I'm picking Makdessi. I think he goes in there and throws a little bit and just tries to get the better of Baghdad. I'll pick the Bull, John Makdessi. So there you go. Our last prelim is it includes a guy that I trained with for a few years, one of the best guys I've ever seen in the gym, Mike Pyle. Guy's been around forever. You know, he's 40 years old. He's going to be 41 in September. But the guy has been around forever, fighting since 1999 in his debut. He has fought the who's who, and he's so well-rounded. One of the best guys I've ever seen in the gym, and it's unfortunate that it doesn't always transfer to the cage. But Mike Pyle is a beast. I was at his last fight at Hendricks Thompson against Sean Spencer. I was losing my mind because he was getting beat, and he came back in the third, and he just wrecked shop on Spencer. Finished him with a TKO with elbows and knees. It was beautiful. I lost my shit completely. I was going crazy. But he is fighting an undefeated fighter named Alberto Mina. This guy, he's very tough. Like I said, undefeated. He only has one decision on his record, and that was his most recent fight against Yoshihiro Akiyama. So this guy is not one to mess with. Bunch of TKOs, bunch of different submissions. It's hard for me to go against Mike Pyle because I know him so well. I've watched him train. I've trained with him. I feel like Pyle can give Mina the first loss of his career. I'm going with Mike Pyle. I might take some smack. I think Mike probably is the underdog. I don't care. Mike Pyle, he does it, pulls it off. So next we'll move to the main card. It's 4-fight main card. It's the first fight of the night is actually possibility for fight of the night. And sorry, I'm trying to mute a phone that shouldn't be ringing. First fight of the night could be fight of the night. Joseph Duffy and Mitch Clark. Most people know Duffy is the guy to last beat McGregor, and so it's an interesting step in for him. He's had a rough time, and sorry, unplugging the phone. Yeah, Duffy was a guy that beat Conor McGregor, was Conor's last loss before Nate Diaz. But unfortunately, his last fight was against Dustin Poirier, and he lost that decision. And Mitch Clark, you might know as the guy that submitted Ally Akinta with a Darce choke from the bottom. It was ridiculous. But his last fight, which was April of last year, he fought Mike Chiesa, who we know has been a freight train recently, and he lost the decision there. I wouldn't sleep on Mitch Clark. You know, both guys are tough. Both guys are very well-rounded. I don't know. I really don't know in this one. This one's tough. It could go either way. They're both good in all areas. I think, you know, Duffy has a few more knockouts, finishes than Mitch, but I'm gonna go with Joe Duffy. I'm gonna go with the Irish Joe. I'm going to go with Joe Duffy to beat Mitch Clark. Don't sleep on this fight, guys. Could be fight of the night. Wouldn't be shocked. So we'll see what happens. The next fight, my bias comes into play. I'm going to talk about one of these guys without the bias. I'm going to address his ability, but I am biased. Not a fan of the guy. He's not a fan of me. It's okay. We're not having a picnic anytime soon, so it's all good. Alan Jobon, friend of the MMA Roasted podcast, friend of mine, amazing fighter, coming off that huge win over Brendan O'Reilly with that knockout, that standing elbow knockout. Jobon is great everywhere. He was supposed to fight Nordine Taleb. Taleb dropped out due to injury, and he is being replaced by Bilal Muhammad, who you might know as the most recent Titan FC welterweight champ. He won the Titan belt against Steve Coral. He knocked him out. It was a tough fight. It's probably the biggest name that Bilal's faced. He's good on the feet. He's got good combos. Not real like knockout finishing power, but he's good. He's a little, in my opinion, slower paced, coasts a lot to decisions. He's got a lot of decisions on his record. And the reason I mention it is because Joe Bond likes to get in your face. He likes to throw wherever you're at. If he's on the ground, if he's wrestling, he's going for stuff. If he's on the feet, he's throwing crazy cartwheel kicks and spinning elbows and front elbows. And I got Joe Bond in this. And I just think Bilal's undefeated. But I think Joe Bond's going to give him the first loss of his career. And that's nothing against him. It's a tough test for Bilal, but I just got Joe Bond. I think he's better everywhere. I think he can finish him anywhere. And I don't think he's going to let Bilal get settled and start throwing combos and doing the things that he likes to do. So we'll see. But I got Alan Joe Bond. That's my pick. That's probably the strongest pick I have of the night of who I think is guaranteed a victory. So yeah. To our co-main event of the evening, a heavyweight matchup between two murderers, Roy Big Country Nelson and Derek the Black Beast Lewis. This is a fight that this has fireworks written all over it. Nelson's a knockout artist, had a tough run his last few fights, like his last 4 fights. He had one victory against Jared Rusholt back in February. I was at that fight. It was a pretty boring decision win for Roy. Before that, he lost decisions to Barnett and Overeem, and everybody remembers the knockout of that Mark Hunt gave him, that uppercut that just face planted him into the mat. He's 2-5 in his last 7, so Roy really needs a win here. He needs an impressive performance. Problem is, he's facing a guy that throws bombs. He's facing a guy that could murder you with a look, let alone throwing punches at you. Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis is a beast, no pun intended. His last 3 wins are knockouts. Actually, all his wins in the UFC are by knockout or TKO. I was at his fight against Grabowski in February at Hendricks Thompson, and I just remember him just leveling this guy, throwing his legs aside and just punching him in the face on the ground and just finishing him. It was brutal. And then we probably all remember the Rothwell Dos Santos card back in April where he KO'd Gabe Gonzaga at the end of the first round. He's got a lot of power. His only issue is if Roy takes him down, it's going to be a long night. Roy is a black belt. As we know, he's got good submissions. Derek is best on the feet. So I don't know if Roy's going to go for a takedown. I don't know if he'll be able to get it because, Roy's a big boy, so the shots are coming a little bit slower. I got Derek Lewis in this one. I think Roy's chin has been, hit enough times over the years that I think Derek Lewis can knock him out. I'm picking Derek Lewis. I say within the first 2 rounds, I think Derek can knock him out. So I got Derek Lewis, Black Beast, going to pull it off. I hope so. We'll see what happens. So, our final fight of the night, the main event, the fight that everybody's talking about for this card. You got Rafael Dos Anjos defending his UFC lightweight championship against just a guy that's been around for a long time, fought everybody, well-rounded everywhere, been a champion in different organizations. Eddie Alvarez, who's coming off of 2 victories over a former champ and a former #1 contender. He's had 3 fights in the UFC. We know he lost his UFC debut to Cowboy. That's a huge test. Before that, he fought the who's who in Bellator. He fought in Dream. He fought everywhere. Eddie's been around the block. And he's a tough out for anybody, and Dos Anjos has been on the rise. Dos Anjos' last loss was over 2 years ago against Khabib. We all remember it. And then he knocked out Ben Henderson, which was unbelievable. He beat Nate Diaz. He beat Anthony Pettis. He knocked out Donald Cerrone in a minute. It's a very tough fight to call. It's a good title defense for Dos Anjos. And this is really where, he's going to be able to say, I beat the best. I think Eddie's one of the top lightweights in the world, not just the UFC. Very tough guy, very well-rounded. I think Eddie can do it. People could call me crazy. I think Eddie can pull it off. I think they could both grind. You know, they use their against the cage tactics to grind. You know, they both got power. They've both had their chins tested before. I know Dos Anjos was a long time ago. I think Dos Anjos has the edge in jiu-jitsu for sure. That's pretty much a given. But I'm picking Eddie Alvarez. I don't know if there will be a finish, but I think Eddie can go 5 rounds with Dos Anjos. I could be wrong. I might be wrong. We'll find out at the event. But I'm picking Eddie Alvarez, the Black Zillion trained, and it'll be interesting to see. I wish them both the best of luck. It's going to be a great fight, so it'll be fun to watch. That is my portion of my predictions. It's been fun doing these. Look out for me tomorrow because Ultimate Fighter's on tonight. Once we find out the finalists for the show, I'll be doing another prediction show where I go in and call the predictions for the Ultimate Fighter finale on Friday. And then probably Friday, I'll do my predictions for UFC 200 and put that out too. So thank you guys for watching again. If you want to check me out, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, CB The Grenade, Facebook, CB Gold. These shows are on YouTube, they're on SoundCloud, and I'm working on getting them onto iTunes as a podcast. I will let you all know when they're out. I really appreciate the support, and as I said, there'll be a couple more episodes this week. So thanks for listening to CB's Gold MMA show. Hope you like the predictions. Hope you like the fights this weekend. There's so much going on. If you're in Vegas, enjoy yourself. Or if you're watching this later, I hope you had a good time in Vegas for the fights. And we'll see you soon. Later.